Hi, Stephanie Brown here from Intelligent Construction Opportunities. Welcome to everybody who has taken the time to jump right on time here at 12:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. As I said, I'm Stephanie Brown from Intelligent Construction Opportunities, offering unique opportunities for vendors to showcase and show out their software and their backgrounds and their beliefs and all the things that brought them to be the construction technology vendors that they are. Today, I'm really pleased to welcome Captain Crunch, better known as Josh Levy, CEO of Document Crunch, to join us and share his views on not only his platform, but really what got him here and what makes Document Crunch such an exciting tool.
Hey, thanks, Stephanie. I'm super excited to be here. This is a fun way to spend the early afternoon here.
Well, you want to share a little bit of your background with the audience? And, you know, just before we went live, we were talking about compliance and, you know, what made you decide to sort of turn the jets on as far as Document Crunch is concerned?
Yeah, I wish I could say I was some cool tech guy, but I'm not. What made me turn the jets on is I just lived with the pain that Document Crunch is solving for every day. I'm a longtime construction attorney. That's all I've done in my professional career before Document Crunch. And I just recognize how foundational contract compliance is to getting good outcomes from projects. And I'll just share with you like a quick, my view of the world here. I think Procore recently did a study that 50% of our $13 trillion construction industry, and 50% of the time, projects finish over budget or over the completion date late, right? 50% of the time in a $13 trillion global market. That's a big percentage of time. Imagine if 50% of the time someone showed up on the job site, they would get hurt. Just think about how big that really is. And so what does that mean? That means that 50% of the time, someone, the contractor, the subcontractor, the owner, the architect, some combination, in 50% of the instances, someone is going to pay more money than they originally thought they were when they signed up to do that awesome project. 50% of the time, wow. We're all exposed to that as industry stakeholders, and it could happen to any of us. And you think about that. That is predicated on two things, Stephanie, and two things only. What did the contract say, right? Who is responsible for the terms of the contract? But oftentimes, and what's not also accounted for is, number two, how did the project team administer the contract? And so let me play that out. 50% of the instances, we're exposed to some paying more than we were supposed to, all based on how the contract was negotiated and how the team administered it. You think about that. You think about how important the contract is. It is foundational to good outcomes for projects. We're called contractors, for crying out loud. Contractors.
Wow. Yes. I never thought. Yes.
It is a massive problem that's facing our industry. It is a massive source of liability for our industry. And up until I decided to do something about it, I was solving this problem every single day in the most inefficient, insular way by just being a construction attorney, doing my thing.
So give us some examples, like what were you struggling with that then sort of helped to shape what you're doing now?
Well, I'll just share this with you. I just can't tell you how many times I've seen, a great company go out of business because they signed up for a contract that they didn't understand the risk profile, right? And I wanted to sit across the table from them when negotiating and say, hey, I'm not your lawyer, but you should really be paying attention to this issue that, you're about to sign up for. That's one, and that's the horror story. But let me just say that it's real. Litigation can torpedo companies, but perhaps much more acute to that is all of the bad projects that I've seen that have derailed someone's career, that have distracted the team as they have to go to depositions and mediations, that have caused them to have a contentious relationship with an owner or a subcontractor or an architect. These projects that have bad project outcomes, or what I call fee erosion because of lack of contract compliance, this is the silent killer of our industry. And it all relates to this idea of how did the team administer the contract during the course of construction. Stephanie, you could have a great contract that entitles you to weather, relief if it rains up in, I think you're in Toronto.
Yeah, sir. Yeah.
So great. So we did a great job negotiating the thing. Congratulations. If the team doesn't give notice the right way, guess what? You ain't getting that weather relief that you thought you were getting. Administering the contract during the course of construction matters. It's an incredibly important part of making sure that you're getting the best possible outcome for your projects. And so I just can't tell you, putting aside all the catastrophic stuff that I've seen in litigation, I can't just tell you all the tension and just needless fees based on consultants, attorneys, throwing money down the drain, not being prepared for changes events, whatever it is that have impacted the industry. And in a $13 trillion industry, I can't tell you how many billions of dollars that adds up to for just straight up profit loss that our industry faces.
So when you wanted to, you saw a way forward, and again, in our previous conversation, we're talking about, well, you thought that tech would be able to help this. So how did you even start to dig out how you'd frame that out, and what were the things like that? Those are huge issues and huge players up and down the value chain in construction, that they're all impacted in some way, shape, or form, directly and indirectly. So how did you start to even right size this to become some sort of automation?
You know, it's that theory of, you know, a journey of 1,000 miles starts with a single step. I mean, candidly, Stephanie, we've been at this for over 5 years now. If you looked at how we were thinking of the world or what the product looked like, you know, 3.5 years ago when we went to market, it's way different than where we're at today. It's an evolution. I think the fundamental aspect would say that my inspiration around solving this problem is only stronger 5.5 years later than it was when we started, because I've now taken the journey into the jungle, and it's not just my vision anymore. This has now become recognized as the collective problem that our industry must face or must address. And document crunch was an idea by a crazy couple lawyers 5.5 years ago, but now we're the standard. We are the best practice. I am so proud to see what we've been able to accomplish to date. We put a real dent in the industry. We are helping the industry today and instilling best practices around contract compliance that previously were unattainable unless you were going to pay someone like me to sit in every one of your project trailers every day and like monitor this. Like, you'd have to throw an awful lot of people at that problem. No one was doing it, not even the biggest contractors. So
let's get into the weeds a little bit. I want to talk about, okay, so everybody and their mother talks about AI now and all this, you know, AI, EIO, as I like to call it. But what I want to understand is, how did you start to right this ship? You've been in it for 5 years. AI is sort of blowing up, I'll say, in the last 2 years. But how does that and the algorithms that you build and the automations help you to help all of this huge problem? And you can take any of your worst case scenarios and sort of tell the audience the story.
So you heard me say this before. I don't consider us an AI company, even though AI is certainly very much a part of our product. I consider us a solving contract compliance with a construction industry company. Before I start with AI, because who really cares about the technology? Let's talk about the problems. Let me tell you what has governed everything we've done. I know 5 things to be true, which I now know are accepted as best practices by our industry, which Document Crunch is solving for every day, AI or not. Here are 5 things that I know to be true. You should understand and document the risk profile of a contract before bidding a job. 1. 2, you should make sure that an awarded project has been negotiated per your company's risk standards. 2. 3, you should make sure that the project teams understand the contract obligations when the project kicks off. 3. 4, you should make contract insights available to the project team easily during the course of construction. 5, you should provide an extra set of eyes at a minimum, or hopefully bulletproof at a maximum, or automate workflows that the project teams are going through every day that require contract compliance and create risk. Those are the 5 things that I know to be true. Those are the 5 aspects of the playbook that we've instilled at Document Crunch. Yes, AI powers that. I'd be happy to talk about like how we're empowering it. But before I even get into that, understand that AI is like such a shiny thing right now. And I was talking to one of my sales guys today who's about to go to Europe with his family, and he's 2 young kids. And I said, Sean, imagine that AI is like the rail system in Europe. It's powerful. It could get you anywhere you want. You have 2 young kids. Imagine that you just gave them your credit card and said, okay, I'm dropping you off at the rail station. Have fun. I mean, would you drop a 12-year-old and a 10-year-old off at the rail station at a busy railway in Europe? Absolutely not. On the other hand, I said, Sean, imagine if you said to your kids, this is a really powerful system. Here's the credit card. Here's a map and a schedule. You're going to get off at this stop on this time. You're going to get off at that stop on that time. You're going to be here at that time. All of a sudden, you were giving them a roadmap, maybe some structure, where now they have a puncher's chance of leveraging the technology to get outcomes that you know you want to get. I think about Document Crunch that way. Anybody can pull whatever the hell they want out of AI, and they're going to be just left in this vast sea of information where you better be damn well confident that you know the right question to ask and you understand whether the answer that you're getting works or not. Or else you're just a 10-year-old kid operating on the metro system in Europe. Maybe you end up in Turkey. Maybe you end up in France. Who knows? But imagine Document Crunch off the shelf. And again, you haven't even heard me talk about AI yet. Says, here are the things that we think you should know about. Here is what's best practice. Here is what the industry thinks is normal. Here's data that supports all this stuff. Okay, great. Now you're going to use AI to help fill in some of these cracks. It's the difference between giving someone a blank canvas, AI, or giving someone a coloring book where there's lines and definitions. That's what Document Crunch does. We're not an AI company. We're helping you solve contract compliance across those platforms or across those 5 maxims I was talking about. And AI certainly helps drive it. So let's talk about that. You upload a contract when you must understand the risk in your contract before bidding a job. You now upload a contract into our software. We automatically will break it down for all the critical issues that you would have paid me a lot of money to tell you about. And we automatically we'll provide you kind of rationale and insights around those issues. So now that's how AI is helping there. Great. But again, we define what those issues are out of the gate. You're not left to say, a contract has been uploaded. I guess I'll ask it about X, Y, and Z. Do we have the ability to do that? Yes. But off the shelf, we've already taken a position. What should you care about when you're looking at a contract for risk? Okay, now it's time to negotiate the contract. Our AI works similarly. We have a plugin to Microsoft Word. We have all kinds of annotation and markup functionality in our product. We allow you to do that work more efficiently with some structure. 3, you want to kick off the project. You want to kick off the team for understanding the contract before they start the project. We have, what's known as our project team playbook or cheat sheet, where we take all that legalese and we make it super digestible for the business people that need to run the project every day. And we cut out all the crap that they don't need to know about. And we say, here are the common issues that teams make mistakes on our projects. Here's what you should know about. How do we make the contract available in phase 4? We do have a chat with your contract function, which I know you were curious about. We do bring those just-in-time insights into Procore. We are starting to orient around work supporting the teams in their day-to-day work. 5, we're starting to automate jobs to be done. We'll be dropping our first true automation function in a few weeks, actually. But imagine that now there's certain tasks, whether it's around payment, giving notice, that project team playbook, where now we can actually take care of 99% of the work for you. So that is how AI is, powering some of these. But I just go back to those 5 problem areas that we're solving.
Well, and to Chad's credit, he sent along, for example, the things that you are talking about, your checklist and your cheat sheet, which are part of the foundation. But what you're really trying to say, I think, is that you've set people up to understand the contract basis, if you will. And to your very point, it's the same old garbage in, garbage out. If you're asking poor questions, you're going to get poor answers from AI. And that's the aid. That's all it is the aid to a good question.
If you are some super sophisticated contracts professional, maybe you could use generic AI and you could speed up some of what you're doing and use some of this chat GPT stuff. My fundamental belief, Stephanie, having advised billions upon billions upon billions of dollars of projects, claims, you name it. I've negotiated the contracts for some of the most sophisticated projects in North America for some of the best, contractors. And I've gone on site and worked with their project teams, or worse, gone on site when we had people going to litigation, and whatnot. Here's the deal. The typical project manager would not be qualified. The typical operations folks would not be qualified. They are not lawyers. They are not super sophisticated contract professional.
And they shouldn't be. And they shouldn't be.
But with a little bit of guidance,
yeah,
a little bit of structure, a little bit of confidence. You know what I know, Stephanie? They are smart as a whip. Building these buildings is way more impressive than reading a contract. But if we can just get them a little bit of easier access to understand this stuff, to understand what they're looking at, it makes all the difference. Why does it make all the difference? One, of course, it saves time. Great. Show me software doesn't save time. But look, people are reporting major time savings, so I'm happy about that. But here's what I know more importantly. Time schmine. When the business people are engaging at this level, when the business people can formulate their own thoughts because they understand what they're looking at, you know what happens? They start to take agency in this. They build awareness around this. And you know what they don't end up in? Litigation. Because they know what they're doing, they own it, and they can be an on-site risk manager, not just a passive participant who waits for all hell to break loose and ends up in a courtroom one day having to take oath as to why, they ordered the code red. My point being, we want the business people to engage in this. We can be a safer industry. We don't have to settle for this being a massive source of liability, but you have to be able to give them just that little bit of a nudge so that they know that they're confident that they can do this.
It really sounds like this is also going to be an agent to help contracts be written better in the future. I don't think it's even the case now of, a contract, to your point, it can be a poorly written contract. But this is also giving agency to a better written contract.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, this is where we made the biggest dent in the industry right now. We're starting to help some of the folks who aren't as sophisticated as the big guys understand what they're looking at and have some context around it. And I will share with you aside, and it starts with that. What does contract compliance start with? Understanding what you're looking at. Stephanie, what I would say is, and our original mission was to empower the industry to understand what's in their contracts. Here's what I'm so proud of. As I sit here today, 3 years and a month into being the CEO full-time at Document Crunch, 5.5 years after we originally went down this journey. We have made a major dent in the construction industry right now. We have many contractors across North America right now that are getting better at understanding contracts using our tool. Period, the end. We have dented it. We have leveled the playing field. We've made it easier. Now we move into our era of empowering project teams in day-to-day workflows, or this project team playbook that I'm talking about. And where we are going, to your point, is yes, I envision a world where we have super fair, data-driven contracts. In fact, some of the work we're doing at the National Electrical Contractors Association right now, imagine, Stephanie, that you're bidding a job. If we could survey all the contractors that are on this, show right now, and I said, how many of you have heard this? If you don't sign this as is, I'm going to the next bidder. We've all heard it. Everyone's heard it. I don't even need to ask. It's a rhetorical question. What if, this is what we're doing for National Electrical Contractors Association, what if I could say, hey, Stephanie, only 7% of your peers have signed a term that looks like this in the last 2 years in your market? Wouldn't you want that chip to be able to say, hold on, this isn't fair. I know it's not fair. There's not a next bidder. Or what if, better yet, Stephanie, I could say to you, your insurance carrier, we're working with insurance carriers and sureties right now. Your insurance carrier thinks that your likelihood of a claim increases by 12%, and the average cost of a claim is $500,000 with a term like this. Therefore, maybe you should put a 12%, $500,000. Maybe you should put $60,000 of contingency on top of your price if the counterparty is going to insist that you take this term. Data-driven results, proactive contracts, so that we can get to what fair and balanced looks like, is not just a nice to have. It means a more balanced industry where you're going to have less contingency, less unknown risks, more aggressive schedules, more profit for all stakeholders. We want that $13 trillion industry making more money. We certainly don't want that $13 trillion industry paying more money to people like me to do he said, she says or to try and rewrite contracts. Let's make our industry better. Let's make our industry fit around contract compliance.
And we've got a question from one of our audience. I love the energy and passion, Josh. Question: contracts as they exist today are still primarily documents. What are your thoughts on our industry evolving from documents to data, and how can we transition from paper-based processes, however digitally enabled, to digitally integrated and automated workflows between all the stakeholders?
LinkedIn user, what a question. How? Document crunch. This is what we're building. We are building an end-to-end contract compliance platform for all stakeholders that have any stake in the execution risk of a construction project. And so when I think about this, that is what we are. We believe that we can ensure best practices are followed, that there's transparency and communication among stakeholders, and that we leave a lot of this stuff that causes ambiguity out of our process moving forward. And that is the vision that we see for Document Crunch.
So Chad, if you're in the background, I want Chad just be in the background. I wouldn't mind if he wouldn't tee up some sort of visual for us, because talking about it and with people like you have, obviously you've helped to build this, Josh, and you get it. You've got such a passion, but sometimes to visually show people and give them context of what it looks like. I don't know, Chad, if you want to just pick up a piece of that.
Yeah, I can jump in here, and I'll add a little bit more context to this too. I think one thing that's really important that piggybacks off this question, which was a great question, is the idea that in that transition means nothing if people aren't using the actual solutions, right? I mean, you can come with the shiniest thing and say, hey, this is the next and best, greatest thing forward, but unless people know how to use it in a way that is holistically beneficial to both them and the team, it's really, really difficult to actually get that buy-in, right? So one thing I want to point out here is I'll show you the platform and just a couple of the things that Josh has been talking about with the AI and our solutions that we're bringing to the table. But we've designed it very intentionally to be built around people who are, on the job. They need to consume things. There's a lot of things going on. So how do we make this AI product usable, right? AI is a scary thing when it's kind of this big system and it's
right. And that's why we want to get off. We want to get off the idea, to Josh's very point. We don't want to be talking about AI. We're trying to contextualize how, in this case, it's being applied. That's all that matters. It gets back to your railroad analogy, Josh.
Yeah. So here's what I would say is what Chad's going to show you. I mean, we've primarily been, like, to date, been used by contractors and trade partners or subcontractors, to use a more traditional term. But we also now have owners, sureties, insurance carriers, material suppliers, architects, and engineers using us, even though we haven't formally gone to market with those folks yet. Why? This goes back to that 50% of projects finish late or over budget, and all of those stakeholders are exposed to increased costs. So here's what I would say is Chad's getting ready to show you some stuff. If you have a need to understand risks in a contract or contract documents, or you have a need to transfer that knowledge to the people that are administrating around the execution risk of a project, owners, reps, program managers, project managers, right? If you have that need, then Document Crunch today is making your life super easy. However, to go back to the prior question, and I'll answer this as well, what we envision is developing a deeper platform where we start to move away from some of this paper stuff, to your point, and just start connecting all these people around this, because I know for a fact most owners don't want to have big, stupid claims. They want the contract followed so they don't have to fight about it. And so we believe that we can standardize a lot of this, and then by standardizing it, you'll start to see more of a platform approach where all these stakeholders are using Document Crunch. To give one more example to Stephanie's prior question too. Imagine that Stephanie is an owner and Josh is a contractor, and we want to do a multifamily project. Imagine in a few years, Stephanie uploading all of her past contracts into Document Crunch, Josh doing the same thing, and Document Crunch spitting out a mutually agreeable template that says, hey, Stephanie, in 85% of instances, this is fine for you. Look at these two clauses that Josh may disagree with. Josh, in 85% of instances, this is great for you. Look at these clauses that Stephanie disagrees with. And that's where we're going with this when you start to talk about how we move out of this. And then I see there's just another question here. What are the top 2 to 3 processes that your customer is using? Well, I would call it over investors or under investors, right? So the vast majority of the industry did not have someone like me sitting there in-house to look at every document that they were bidding. So I think they were left with an impossible choice. They would either use outside consultants to like educate them on this, or they would hold their nose and sign the contract. Outside consultants are super expensive for those of you who don't know. I think that if I was still practicing law right now, I'd probably be charging $700-800 an hour to tell you in simple stuff that's in your contract. And no, I'm not incentivized to give you less because I get paid by the hour. So that $700-800 an hour, I want to make stretch over as many hours as I can. So that's under investors. The over investors would hire people like me and sit there in-house and do all this robust risk management like work at the onset. But whether you were an under investor or an over investor, guess what? The folks in the field were still not having that knowledge transfer, period. So to answer your question, this is why I exist. There was no real process or platform before us. And I am proud that we were the first people to jump into this and like do the work. But I'm more proud that we have established a platform that has been operationalized by our industry every day and is making a dent. It's more important to me that we are effective, which we are, than the fact that it was a great idea. My mom would tell you how smart I am, what a special boy I am. None of that matters if we don't solve problems for our industry. And I'm way more proud that now our processes or our platform is the best practice. If you value contract compliance, which I believe you should value as much as you should value making sure your kid wears a helmet when they ride a bike, making sure that the chef washed their hands before they cook dinner, making sure that you took an Uber home instead when you've had a few drinks. Even if some of these practices are inconvenient or can be costly or time intensive, guess what? This is a standard of, are you doing the right thing or not? The industry is safer when we instill best practices around contract compliance. That's
well, I think what you're also talking about is to me, the ding ding moment in the last 2 minutes of what you've just said is that you have joined up the site so that people that are doing the actual building where they need to understand what they're doing so they have agency to make the decisions that are actually putting that structure up or restoring it or whatever the scenario is. And I think that's been the missing link. The back office in construction holds so much of this knowledge that never moves to where it's actually applied.
And so mistakes are made, which costs us money, or even worse, puts us out of business with big litigation. And again, going back to your whole AI question, Stephanie. So great. We don't give a you-know-what that ChatGPT exists. How about the fact that you're in the change order provision in Procore right now, today, and now Document Crunch is bubbling up all the things that you need to know about change orders per the terms of your contract, which means that we are like an angel on your shoulder that says, let us help you do the right thing, Stephanie. There's a contract that you should consider. Let us help you do the right thing so that you don't succumb to the devil on the other shoulder, which is, whoops, I didn't comply, or whoops, I didn't know that I needed to comply, and I put myself at risk. And that's what we want to be. We want to be an angel on the shoulder of this industry to make it safer as it goes through its projects.
Well, and that's why we called today's session, you're bringing those contracts to life, because it just doesn't sit somewhere after it's signed. You're making it something that is tangibly witnessed, checked, understood, so on and so forth during the course and the life cycle of that project.
5 chapters, right, of that playbook I just talked about. And you got it end to end throughout the project life cycle, from the minute that RFQ or RFP comes out through signing that final payment app and getting that final, certificate of occupancy. You better comply with that contract, and we're going to make that easier for you.
So, Chad, what do you want to tee up based on all this?
Yeah, I think it's really important to align this with a couple different chapters of that playbook, because this is really essential in understanding how to deploy technology, right? So second chapter is, a lot about negotiation. The first chapter is about understanding the risk. And then we're going to talk a little bit about the actual deployment, right? Because I think one of the undertones of this conversation is really about yeah, there's the back office motion for actually understanding what's in the contract, but how do you roll this out to the people who are the stakeholders when it's actually, the obligations that you have to comply with? How is there that parity and understanding? So let me try to present my screen here. We're gonna go on a
yeah, we're going to go on a little tech journey in the background here and see how this all plays out.
see how this all plays out. Okay, you should be looking at
we got it.
Is that working?
We
Okay,
got it.
excellent. So really quickly, going back to what Josh said, we need to extract a lot of risk from these contracts and understand what's in it, right? So the whole premise behind Document Crunch, at least in the first earlier chapters of this playbook, is to understand when you put an agreement in, a contract in, really any sort of document, what is in there, right? I'm sure a lot of your users will know as they're looking at this. Agreements are not these nice buttoned up, super simple, contracts that are, 9 or 10 pages long. They're long. There's a lot of legalese. They're complex. And so our system using AI basically goes through these very, very large documents and says, look, we've benchmarked all of the content in this document and held it against about 45 provisions that we know builders need to be aware of when they say that they're either going to accept a job, maybe deny it outright, or go back to the negotiating table to make it more equitable for them. And these are, fundamental items, right? It's like change orders, insurance, liquidated damages, right? Like it's all the things that you're likely going to be looking for in general. So extracting that is what this does right here. We give you all the occurrences of where these, these language pieces live in the document and how it rolls up to things like the provision that you're actually looking at. So like changes in the work, for example. Now, going back to the negotiation side though, and this is really important to actually demonstrate what we're talking about from getting everything level set to have it be a more favorable and equitable contract, is the idea that if you have people who are stakeholders who need to weigh in on accepting or denying or negotiating certain aspects of this, you can start to build out these workflows, we call them checklists, within your review process. And this can be a solo sport if it's just one person in the back office, or you can have multiple people looking at the items that are critical for you to accept or to understand before you say yes or no to an agreement.
So based on best practices, Document Crunch is already handing you the structure. Is that fair?
Yeah, and we can customize that structure to, based off of what you do already for your own, decision-making process. So we understand that not every company is going to look at an agreement and say, we need to look at this, this, and this. That process is not going to be the same as the next company. So whatever your processes are, we can actually build this directly into Document Crunch and have these checklists, these review workflows be, in parity with what you already have internally. The idea though, is that those workflows are now powered by all of the language that we find in these construction contracts to help you understand the negotiation and the review process better. I want to be very clear here. And this is something.
Let me just, if you go back though to that list, Stephanie's question. Stephanie, you kind of nailed why I founded this. I've worked with every major contractor in the United States, and we're working with most every major contractor today at Document Crunch. Their issues are exactly the same across these contracts, and off the shelf, to your question, we already provide so much structure. To Chad's point, what we do on top of that, though, is start to make some tweaks so that we make sure that the questions as you would want them to be asked or the guidance that you would want to put is in the product. But off the shelf, Joe, the contractor, can upload a contract right now and see pretty much the structure that Chad is showing you, which are, here are the big issues in your construction contract. Here's some guidance around those issues. Here's what and now you be the judge. So yes, that is why I was talking about structure being important. We built this purpose-built based on my co-founder, two longtime construction attorneys and executives, us knowing that these are the issues that the industry grapples with.
But and so there is the linchpin. So when you go back now, Chad, and I do know that you start off by you allow your users to obviously, the first thing is upload their own contracts as they are. How does the system analyze it so it knows perhaps what's missing, what's out of date, what all of that kind of an idea.
That's our secret sauce, Stephanie. That's where the AI starts to kick in. So we purpose built artificial intelligence to do all of that stuff. And this goes back to like so much of what you would have paid me for in my prior life was just to do that. And now the AI can do that in like milliseconds.
I was going to say, what is the turnaround? What is the average number of contracts that any one individual using Document Crunch right now uploads and has to go through?
It varies based on company size, candidly, Stephanie. There's some contractors that have way more, deal flow than others. The average contract length is 75 pages of a commercial contract based on what's been in Document Crunch over the last several years. And I would argue that I'd say Chad may have a perspective on this. I'd say our average time to process a 75-page contract is probably 5 minutes or less.
Yeah, I would say that's about typical here. I mean, you compare it to the amount of time that it takes for a human to do the same amount of work, probably less thorough as well, is very, very, very different, right?
So give us an idea. So we really want to talk about how this enables the field. So if a project manager has got this example maybe in front of them, how would they be using it and applying it?
Yeah, let's jump into the actual product itself here. So if you have a contract that you've come to terms with, there's obviously a lot of things within that document that you need to understand and give to your project teams for them to be able to understand it as well. So there is compliance within all the moving parts. We have something called the cheat sheets, right? The cheat sheets are basically a summary analysis of all the major items that need to be distilled down to your operations teams, your project teams, basically anybody who is going to be material to maintaining compliance with what you've just agreed to do. So cheat sheets are these wonderful little things that basically give you kind of summary items of the things that are material to the contract. So say we take like final payments, instead of going through pages and pages and pages of legalese within the contract, there are now these overviews and kind of these bite-sized pieces of how you handle certain aspects of financial management, change management, and even just project execution in general. Now, the difference between this and the contract is that there are no project teams that have an excuse not to read this and to understand what they're beholden to now. This is the Cliff Notes. This is the Spark Notes version of this. Now, I want to take this one step further. So this is our level setting and making sure that all of our, that our project teams have the right insight into this. But when we talk about our fourth chapter, which is just in time insights, we know that maybe all of this stuff doesn't necessarily cover exactly what your project teams need to know. So we have our chat, right? Our chat with your contract is this ability to basically go back and forth with the document like it's a living, breathing thing. Have a conversation with it like you would your back office attorney and get the insights that you need for whatever it is.
Let me play this out right now. While we're sitting here right now, you've got project managers in an OAC meeting who are maybe getting yelled at that they can't charge allowable markup. Now we're arming them. You know what never used to happen, Stephanie? The project manager would never say, hold on a second. Let me step outside. Can we take a time out? They would never call their attorney and say, hey, can you research this issue? But now in real time, Chad can literally type that issue into the chat and we're going to generate an instant response with a citation. We have superintendents right now walking the job site that are saying, wait a minute, what rebar was specified? And now they're able to query the specifications using our tool and get instant answers so that before the concrete is poured over the rebar, they can say, hey, hold on. It looks like you've got, the wrong rebar in here, or nope, we're good to go.
Let's take this to the next level too, because those people who are walking the field, right, are generally not in, on their computers looking at, the Document Crunch system that they're logged into. They're going to be looking at their systems of record like Procore. So Josh was mentioning earlier that we've got this integration level to help bring these just-in-time insights to where the users actually are, right? So let's take a look at this just really quickly. This is our integration within Procore, right? So they're in Procore, they have a tablet, they're in there, they're actually on the field, they're looking for these rebar specs. And these are the things that now using Document Crunch, you can not only get the overviews with the cheat sheets here, But you can ask that question that Josh was just talking about directly from the Procore interface that they're already logged into. So we're delivering those just-in-time insights, not only from a contextually relevant perspective, giving the people what they need to understand as it relates to their contract that they've agreed to, but we're doing it in the places that they already live in. So there's a convenience aspect there.
So someone asked before, what were the processes like? You know what I can tell you? Project teams were left to swim in a very deep ocean by themselves around those types of workflows that we're talking about. And what we believe now, by arming them in Procore or giving them access to this chat function, we're actually giving them a puncher's chance, if not something more than a puncher's chance, to actually get it right and say, hold on, Mrs. Owner, you're saying that I can't use this, but look at the contingency provision. It clearly allows for me to use this. So no, I am not going to just write this off. Here's your change order. That means less fee erosion. That means in 50% of the time of that $13 trillion industry, we can start carving back or clawing back a lot of profits, which would serve to bolster our bottom line as an industry.
So I want to kind of wind this around to what's on the roadmap. You mentioned it a little earlier at the top of our call. If you can just maybe reiterate that now, and then we're going to let the folks know, how can they do a deeper dive into a demo with you guys and perhaps even make it customized right for them then and there?
Yeah, let me start with that. Let me just say this right now. If you have a stake in good outcomes at your project level or from your projects, I'm going to say right now that it is negligent to not be using Document Crunch, period, the end. That's a hard stop right now. That is the case. And I'm saying this because I know that there's a best practice. And I cannot imagine that when hard hats started being issued, that we all just waited around, or safety harnesses started being issued, that we all just waited around and said, well, let's just see if they work. And we'll just send. You need to stop with the status quo, and you need to start getting fit around your contract and compliance with your contract. So I will start there. To answer your question about the future, we are already making an impact across those 5 chapters of compliance where I believe you now need to adopt this, but we intend to just greatly deepen the platform. Like I said, we will be launching some true automation. Right now, you see there's a lot of supplementation, but imagine that we will fully automate some workflows that teams are going through right now that are risky, because we want to be that extra set of eyes or that bulletproofing, process. So, we'll start doing that. We'll start just, kind of ensuring that best practices are being followed through some additional workflows around the industry that are risky. And you'll just see the platform, deepen. And then kind of the longer term vision is around some of that data driven, template creation. Hey, maybe this is a less insurable project because we know these things. So you'll start to see these platform insights that we start turning back to our users over the long term. Which
so
again,
you're saying it'll feed out on historical data.
That's exactly right. So imagine that it starts. I think of this in 3 lanes. You've got the document intelligence, our core product. You now have supporting project teams, which is what we're in now. And the 3rd lane, which is probably the most shallow lane, but we already have some of it, is starting to give just headquarters peace of mind that the business people are doing the right things and that historical learnings are then driving decision-making as we start the process over again. And that 3rd lane is kind of a little bit less developed than the first 2. We're not a super old company yet, but that's how we're thinking about this. And that's where we're at right now.
Well, I want to kind of leave the audience with a question. On a scale of 1 to 10, how confident are you in your team's ability to fully understand your contracts now? And that should be kind of a takeaway question that leads us to an opportunity for people to check it out and actually get a full out demo. What do you want to say, Josh?
I think there's actually a second question that goes behind that. One is, how confident are you? It's a great question. Second question I have is, how do you even verify that your confidence level is accurate? Let me help you. One, you should not be that confident in the typical project team's ability. But even if you were the person who says, my team is so smart, they are like lawyers, they get this all the time, I'm going to say, so what are you doing to verify that? Document Crunch can help you manage both. That is super important. We want to instill best practices. We want your teams to be doing the right thing. We want to be that angel You would train your teams and they sign policies and procedures relating to things like sexual harassment and things like that every year. You have way more risk based on the execution of your projects, I can tell you right now, than you have to sexual harassment claims. Why are we not taking the extra step and not just saying, I'm making this easier or I'm confident, but I also can verify that progress is being made. I can measure success.
That's a great example, though, Josh, because construction is trying to attract more and more women in the industry and to stay in the industry. So that clause in and of itself is going to hold so much power moving forward in infinite ways.
So I'll jump in here as an answer to the second part of your question as well, Stephanie. How can people see Document Crunch as it applies to their situations, right? So get a demo of it. One thing we love to do is when you do take a demo of Document Crunch, we actually ask for a version of your contracts, right? One that you may be working with specifically, one that you maybe dealt with in the past. The idea here, though, is that we can actually do a live demonstration that shows the power of, at least kind of the first couple chapters of our playbook, the analysis and the ability to inform very helpful negotiations. So what we want to do is be able to show that in a very highly relatable way. And that's typically done through contracts. I'll also plug a little bit here and say that Intelligent Construction Opportunities does have a landing page. So if, there we go. So if you do have the ability to go there, sign up for a demo. We'd love to know that you came from this webinar as well. And of course, personalize that demo as much to make it as much as we can to make it as high impact as we can for you to really understand everything that we've talked about in the last 45 minutes.
Absolutely. And of course, we'll follow up with our registrants, and obviously people will be watching this, when they have, time to thoroughly sit with it. There was a lot to take in today. I want to thank Josh Levy, Captain Crunch himself, for dropping his passion on this live stream today. There's no doubt what Intelligent Construction Opportunities is trying to do is align with developers and software creators who put the business first. And that's what you've done. You've put construction first, and what you've enabled in the way of an automation has followed. And that is the only way that we as a society are going to continue to function, needing the people that get up every day and use these first to accomplish the things we all rely on day in and day out in our infrastructure. So I want to thank both Chad and Josh for taking the time. And by all means, if there's any questions anybody has about today, they can DM any one of us on LinkedIn. We're happy to answer, and we'll be following up accordingly with more information. So again, is there anything else that either of you would like to add before we close it up?
I just want to say thank you, Stephanie. We're here for the industry. We want to move the industry over. Let us be a partner. Any way we can help, Stephanie, we're here, and our industry can be better. It can be less risky. And I'm really optimistic that we're on a great path to do that.
I think so too. I mean, a long time coming, 5 years of evolution, and with more and more of what's happening in technology, I can't imagine what this is going to look like and be able to enable 5 years from now. So thank you again. And thanks.
Thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
Thanks so much.
And with that, we'll call it a wrap.